Thanks for tuning in to today's podcast. Please remember that all of the information in this podcast episode is limited to general information only. That means the information is not specific to you, your needs, goals, or objectives. So you should seek the advice of a licensed and trusted financial professional before acting on the information. And before you acquire or apply for a financial product, please read the PDS or product disclosure statement, which should be available on the issuer's website. Lastly, please keep in mind that past performance is not indicative of future performance. Kate, welcome to this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast.
It's good to be back, and we're just a few days before the end of the year, so it's quite exciting to be hitting the airwaves now and just making sure you're on track for setting your financial goals for next year and putting as much in as possible to actually achieving them, because it's very easy to write a few things down and shove it in the back of the drawer. So this is what we're going to try and have a short and sweet episode today, just to help you set your goals and get ready for the new year.
Cool. Okay, so first of all, how did your goals for 2020 go?
Yeah, so I think the goals changed quite a lot, but I did have a look back at what I put on a Google Doc at the start of the year, and I did manage to work towards most of them, mostly because I didn't actually spend all the money I'd saved for my trip, and I had a few jobs throughout the year, and I mean, job seeker for a month or two before I was working somewhere else. So that was fun. I probably worked a little bit less because I was studying and because of COVID. So definitely saving more, less super because I wasn't working full-time the whole year. So that's probably something I've got to think about next year. And definitely more in the emergency fund this year. So, and I think overall in my goals, I said, this is where I hope to be at the end of this year, pending no market movements at all, because I couldn't really factor any of that in because I didn't know what was going to happen. So I think I'm actually above where I hoped I would be. So all in all, pretty happy considering the roller coaster that's been this year.
Totally. That's a great job. Well done.
What about you?
Well, I said, this was in 2019, I said, develop a budget and never forget to pay ourselves for the future and save for experiences like holidays. Well, obviously we couldn't do too much holidaying. Even though we did do a bit of, like, before COVID, we did, I think, a couple of weekends away, but that was good. Our budget actually got looser this year. So we had a much more strict budget in 2019 than we did in 2020. We still had that kind of, that pay ourselves first mentality. So with the mortgage now and, all the essentials, we now also have, we typically invest $1,000 a month at minimum, which is great to be able to do that. But, that's a simple thing that we've been doing for years. I noticed, though, I did actually turn off the calendar reminder for that about a month ago. So we've been I guess it hasn't been as, like, normally we have everything really structured in that regard, but this year was probably a bit looser. So probably didn't really hit on all of those. One of my other, which is more like a professional thing, was return to study and do some more accounting and software engineering learning. Definitely did more software engineering this year. Didn't do as much accounting work. I don't really need to do that nowadays. But so I kind of nailed the professional one there. But for the budget, it kind of got a bit looser than normal. We still managed to save, but probably not as much as we thought. We obviously bought a house this year, so that kind of put a dent in things. But overall, pretty good. So pretty happy with that. Okay, so I think you've got some really good exercises for us. And when I say us, I mean me and the listeners to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this great, it's a non-profit. I mean, they don't charge anything, but it's called Year Compass. And I'll put it in the show notes. But I've done it the last few years, and they produce this booklet that has all these questions and prompts to think about at the end of each year and then sort of in planning for next year. And it really covers a whole range of things, and it does get you thinking. So I'll put that in the show notes. It's worth doing. But they have some questions to sort of prompt yourself and think about your year. And I thought I'd include them here, and I've sort of pivoted them towards being about finances. I think they were 6 sentences about my life in 2020, but just so to make it relatable to here. So I thought I'd just share these here. But so going through these prompts and thinking about each of them and answering them. So 6 sentences about my finances in 2020. The wisest decision I made.
So what was the wisest decision?
Well, probably not to leave Australia for safety, but that actually was financially beneficial.
Totally.
I mean, I've got that money aside now. Or maybe if we're talking more finances, not selling out in March when the market went down.
Yep. Cool.
What about you?
The wisest decision I made. I guess not selling out in March, but that never factored into my thinking. Probably from, sounds funny, but actually paying myself a wage through the business. I never did that before. Never a consistent wage, but I've taken a consistent wage now, and that's a really good thing, because I think I needed to, not just from a financial perspective, but also from like a psychology. Actually paying yourself kind of rewards you and tells you that everything, the business that you created is actually a business and it's not just a side hustle.
Yeah.
So that was probably the wisest decision.
The next prompt is the biggest lesson I learned.
What would that be?
No, it's a bit of a hard one. I think I learned to take more risks this year and push myself out of my comfort zone. I think that was probably maybe the main takeaway for me.
If I'm keeping it financial related, the biggest lesson I learned, I would say that how easy it is for people to get complacent. So just seeing everything happen during coronavirus, how underprepared so many people were for something that, I'm not saying a pandemic was predictable, but bad things do happen, and how underprepared people were for that. I think that was a lesson learned. When you and I talk to people through the podcast, we're talking to people that do want to do the right thing, right? Everyone, you're listening to this, you want to do the right thing, but there are so many people out there who just don't even think about it until it's too late. So that's a big lesson learned. Not necessarily for me personally, but just kind of thinking about that broadly.
The biggest risk I took.
Oh, that's a good one. What risk? You just said, what risk? You're getting comfortable with risk. What's the biggest risk you took this year?
I think quitting a job in the pandemic. I don't think I've spoken about this on the podcast.
No.
After I wasn't going on my trip and then I was made redundant, I took a job at quite a large global financial firm, and I was there for 3 months, and it was just not the right environment for me. I felt like a robot, and it wasn't the right place for me to grow and develop. It wasn't going to challenge me. So after 3 months, I surprised them all and I handed in my resignation, and that was definitely a risk. But
Totally.
I think it has worked out.
Yep. Well, now you're part of the furniture here at Rask. It's very good. It's a great risk to take. But it is. Swapping jobs at any time is a risk. Sometimes the best decisions are made when things do seem like the most dark out. And I think, a lot of, this is a business analogy, or anecdote, a lot of the best businesses, Microsoft, Okta, which is another software company in the US, started during the depths of depressions, when it was totally against the grain to do it, and they did it. And I think from a personal perspective too, sometimes it does take something like we've just been through to realize that it's okay to take risk. But I mean, credit to you. You took a risk. I hope it pays off. I think it will. So the next one is the biggest surprise of the year, ... What was the biggest surprise of the year?
I think the whole, COVID, I mean, didn't see that happening. That was a complete surprise. It took everyone's plans and sort of smushed them into a little ball and threw them away, and everyone had to sort of figure out everything again. That was probably the biggest surprise, and I guess the market crash that went with that, and then the very quick recovery.
Yeah.
That was quite a surprise. I was like, oh, it blinked and it's gone.
Yep, I would agree. Obviously, COVID's a pretty big thing. Totally. Maybe the biggest surprise on that was how, when it comes to the biggest surprise, how in some countries, and even in ours here in Australia, how some people believed that being like socially isolating was like against their like human rights and their identity as people. I think like, yeah, that surprised me how some people could like, I just found it so bizarre that they were saying there's legitimate crisis going on here, and people would be out there like rallying against the government for doing that, for making those decisions to try and control it. I just thought that was bizarre. That surprised me. Okay, the most important thing I did for others. That's a really good question. Really good prompt. What's the most important thing you did for others?
I think, I spent quite a bit of the year, like this isn't a financial thing, it probably just sort of takes time, but helping my nan out quite a bit this year, sort of caring for her because she was all alone during COVID, and I was sort of the nearest family member, so just sort of like me and my sort of mum doing a lot of stuff like that. But maybe if we bring it back to the world of finance, probably hopefully making this fire course that should have come out by now as we're recording this.
Yep. By the time we record this, it should be out. If it's not out, it'll be out very soon. So that's a great one. The most important thing I did for others. Wow. Maybe I'm so vain I didn't do anything for others. I honestly don't know. That's a really good question.
You employed people during a pandemic. You created jobs.
Yeah, well, we've taken on, another probably 3 to 5 people in the last few months. So that's great. That's an important thing. I think maybe if I could be so vain, I would say that I hope that during coronavirus and when that fallout was happening, I told people not to panic. And I said to people, don't worry about the forecast for property markets. Everyone was preaching doom and gloom. And I was saying how important it was to still be invested and call out people that were, advocating for everyone else to get out of the market because it was so easy to play on that fear trigger. So maybe that's something important I did for others from a financial perspective. The biggest thing I completed. Well, Kate, what is the biggest thing that you've completed?
I had so many plans for this year, but I was hoping I'll finish my road trip around Europe by now. But I think maybe I went back and did some tertiary study this year, and that was a pretty big step for me, doing a 5-hour exam, and I hadn't done an exam really since high school, so that was a pretty big step for me. What about you, Owen?
The biggest thing I completed this year, from a financial perspective, it would have been from a all in all finance perspective, would have been turning around the business. That was close to impossible, but we did it. But the next best thing, the biggest thing from a financial perspective is obviously buying a house. That was a big event. It was a good event. It was exciting. And I think if I had any advice for people would be, don't become emotionally invested. And it's such a hard thing for most people to do.
Yeah.
Even those people closest to me were more invested than I was, but that would probably be it. So, I think those are some really good prompts, 6 prompts to kind of reflect. And now we've got a few more.
Yeah, so I might just run through these. Maybe we won't answer them so we can keep this short and sweet. But the other one is 6 questions about my finances during 2020. So think about, what are you most proud of? Who are the 3 people who influenced you the most?
And then what were you not able to accomplish?
What is the best thing you've discovered about yourself?
And what are you most grateful for?
I think I had a double up there. I might have pasted this question twice, but if you go to the link in the show notes, there's the free resource there so you can get it from the horse's mouth. Yeah,
but it's both of these exercises are brilliant, especially the 3 people who most influenced you.
Yeah, and it's a good idea to think about things that aren't just the numbers, because a lot about our finances is influenced by everything around us and the people in the community and what we're doing in our jobs and our hobbies. So it's really good to think about it more holistically than just, this is my budget, this is how much I'm going to invest each month. So I think that's a really good exercise to do before you start setting your goals for the next year. But now we'll run through some tips for creating your goals and an action plan to achieving them for 2021.
Cool. So everyone has different goals. So some, it might be paying down debt. Others might be investing for the first time. It might be buying a house. It might be convincing your partner to do something. How do you prioritize when you have multiple goals?
I think I mean, we're both used to having multiple short, medium, long-term goals, but write down everything you want to achieve and then sort of categorize it into the short, sort of up to a year, medium/intermediate, sort of maybe that 1 to 3, 4, 5 years, depending on sort of how you're thinking about it. And long-term, for some people that's 5 years plus, others take an even longer view and maybe think of their long-term goals as that 10-year plus time frame. So really depending, I think as a young person, long-term goals are more maybe that 5-year plus category. But maybe for you, it's sort of starting to become a more 10-year plus time frame. It's a little bit easier to have a longer time frame once you've got a bit of perspective, I think.
Yeah. So short term, up to a year, might be, say, paying down a $2,000 credit card.
Yeah.
Intermediate might be like buying a house if you're a first-time buyer. A long term might be like, I don't know, if you're a couple, you're in your 50s, having $1 million in retirement by the time you hit 65, something like that. So that's three groups or buckets that you can put things into to try and categorize what's important, and then prioritize from there. But I mean, it's easy to listen to this podcast, Kate. If people have these goals, like, are there any steps people can take to just maybe crystallize them a bit more?
Yeah. So I think once you write them down and you've worked out what the categories are, and then you've actually prioritized what's most important, I think you've kind of got to pick one of them in each category to be your overall priority. I think too many short-term savings goals and too many medium, like it gets too cluttered and confused. Like saving for a house plus maybe like a big overseas holiday plus maybe saving for a baby at the same time, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So like you can have different savings accounts or investing accounts and keep them going, but I think you have to choose one overall priority for each category.
For sure.
And then once you've worked out what your priorities are, it's working out an action plan to achieve them. So maybe your short-term goal over the next 12 months is to pay off $5,000 of credit card debt. And how are you going to pay that off over 12 months? Can you split that $5,000 over a 12-month time frame? What does that look like each month? And in your budget, is there room for you to carve out enough money to achieve that? And if there's not, is there any way you can increase your income? Are you able to start a side hustle? Are you able to sell some things? I don't know, do some gardening in the local community, anything. So you might work out you need to put away $500 a month to paying off debt. How are you actually going to get that $500?
So you can you can have your goals, short, medium, intermediate, long term, and you can match strategies to deliver on them.
Yeah, and I think the short-term goals are more just about the numbers and just like, I've got 12 months, I need to pay off $5,000. How much is that each month? How am I going to get that money and pay it off? Can I automate that? I think that's a much more straightforward thing. I think once you get to those medium, long-term goals, you've got to change a lot more things.
It's more habits.
Incorporate a lot more. Like saving for a house deposit now, like a Melbourne, 20%, that's at least like $100,000, what are we talking about? And so that's a massive goal, saving that much money. So that might be a 5-year goal between one or two people. And you're going to have to change a lot more things to get towards that goal. And the plan's got to be much bigger and it's got to be sustainable over a longer period of time, because you might be able to sacrifice a lot to pay off a quick goal or save $5,000 in a year. But if you're trying to save $100,000 over 3 to 5 years, it's got to have a different approach.
Yeah, totally. So, and I do like this. I think the most important thing for you to do if you're listening to this is just use Kate's strategy, go away, maybe sit down with your partner if you have one. If you don't, do it by yourself. That's totally cool too. Have your 3 categories or like lists, put the goals in there, maybe have like a time around that as well. And then then prioritize one. So pick one, particularly in those intermediate to long-term goals. How about, Kate, I know you're a fan of, I know you do this in your own financial life, particularly with your investing, so how you invest. What's one strategy that people can use to do the heavy lifting for them?
Yeah, I think I'll bang on about this point until the cows come home, but automate as much as you can of your goals and your financial plan. Anything that's going to help you end up in a more positive place, automate. If it's something that's going to leave you worse off, like Apple Pay and being able to spend really easily, I would make that harder. So positive end result, automate. Negative end result, don't automate, and put some friction in there. So whether that is for you, you've worked out that debt payment. Can you automate that direct debit each month to pay off that credit card, or can you automate a BPay transfer? Or if you're saving the money in your travel fund, I mean, it's a bit weird to talk about travel right now. But maybe you want to go to Tasmania, so you want $1,000 by next Christmas. Can you automate that so each time your paycheck comes in, a set amount goes straight into that, and you don't even have to look at it over the year? It just slowly accumulates, and you get to the end of next year, and boom, you've got your $1,000.
Yeah, it's so good. Automating your finances and even your investing to some extent. Automating it is kind of one of the keys to compounding in the 21st century, I think.
Yeah, and you don't even notice
super important.
it.
Yeah.
Like I've had an automated investment going since 2017 of $300 a month, and it's just slowly sort of snowballed. And I looked at it the other day, and I was quite amazed at how far I'd come compared to where I started with just $1,000. So that was quite amazing to see the reality of that over a few years, because it does take time to see the effects of automation. It might only be $5 here or $100 there, but over multiple years, you really start to go, well, this has had an amazing effect on my goals. And also, not everything can be automated. I mean, a lot of brokers, you still have to make manual buy and sell orders. So if that's the case, automate the money that you want to invest into a set savings account. So you could just do that as soon as your pay hits. Or if you get paid sort of on an ad hoc, just manually transfer the money.
Straight away.
And then, straight away, just get it out of there, get it out of your site. And then you've got that investment account. Maybe you've got $2,000 and you're ready to buy your next share or ETF, and you put an event in your calendar. I think if you can't automate it, put an event in your calendar. Otherwise, it never happens.
Yep, I have a calendar reminder. I've got it right here in front of me. We have business goals, my goals, partners' goals, and then group goals as well. So we've got that all in there, and it shoots through a message every month on the 1st. So we're recording this on the 30th, so I'll get this tomorrow. And it's just a little reminder just to check on things and track your progress. This is a really interesting thing that you've put in our discussion points for today, Kate. You've said, get accountable for your success. Can you explain what you mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not enough to just write these goals down and put a plan into place and automate as much as possible. I think you need to have people in your court that can check on you and say, how are you going with those goals? Maybe for you, that's a partner, it's a parent, it's a sister, it's a close friend. And you actually ask them every month, check in with me and see if I've actually hit my target for the month. Have I done this? Is there someone you can talk to? I mean, there's even programs online where you can find an accountability buddy, or you can put $100 up, and if you don't reach your goal and prove it, the money gets donated to charity.
Oh, right.
So there's all sorts of ways, but I just think finding someone in your life that can keep you accountable, it really helps. And finding someone that you can even just talk about your finances with is a major help in your personal finance journey.
Cool.
And maybe even that's an accountant or a financial advisor for you if there's someone you can talk to. I think it's just having someone checking in and checking on your progress and making sure you're accountable to your financial future self.
Yeah, cool. That's great advice. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. I'm guessing a few of these are still forming for you, but do you have any money goals for 2021 that you've already laid out?
Yeah, I think I probably will go through this whole exercise that I mentioned, the Year Compass booklet, closer to the end of the year and actually work out. I mean, at the start of this year, my financial goals were quite specific. They were like, this automation will happen each month, and therefore this account should end up with this much money. So that quite helped me because I could see a very specific target and overall end result. I think for me, my money goals next year, I want to keep learning more about share investing, a less random approach, maybe.
The dartboard approach.
Yeah. And I think I just like trying lots of new things and trying all the new apps. So that sometimes gets me distracted from the overall point.
Yep.
So I think a little bit more focus would probably be my main word for 2021. And yeah, I just think investing, I'm going to keep going with my ETF robo-advisor, keep adding money in a quarterly basis there, still putting money into my managed fund each month, investing in some direct shares. I like the idea of getting an apartment, but I mean, I think that's more of
careful, Kate.
a like. I just got carried along with all of Owen's excitement this year. So maybe I'll put some more money away for a potential future house deposit. But I still think that's a while away.
All right, let's talk about that before we get to that big one. Cool. For me, it's probably just going to be more accountable with actually making the investments at a set time.
Yeah.
So with our service, I buy all the shares that are in there, but I can only buy all the shares if I've got money available. But I'm going to make sure there's money available. We're actually like the house that we bought, as people know, is a fixer-upper, and we've sunk a fair bit of money into that already, and we will continue to do so while it adds value and makes it livable. So that will be done early next year in 2021, and then it's just going to be back to the stock market. Like everything's going to be 100% back into the stock market. So I'm super excited for that. Maybe, the way we're currently thinking is that we'll probably be able to holiday in 2021 in Australia.
Yeah.
I think that's already on the cards. But in 2022, then that's kind of when we're preparing for maybe we can go overseas. So maybe that's something for you too.
Yeah, that would be the dream. I might maybe I get to do my 6-month trip. Maybe it might be a 3-month trip by the time we get to 2022.
Yeah.
Depends how enthusiastic I am.
Yeah. And that's something that people can work forward to as well. That for us, that would be an intermediate goal. So that's what we're doing. From a business perspective, what's going on behind the scenes is probably going to be super exciting. And well, it is going to be super exciting. We've been working on it for so long, and it's kind of, you know me, I'm like one of those people that if there's something done, I want it done yesterday. And these courses, particularly your course, which is brilliant.
They're not overnight.
They're not overnight successes.
No.
So we've got heaps of courses that we're bringing to people this year. And they're not just from us, like not from me, not just from you. There's others in the team who are contributing to them. But then there's also experts from other, I guess, sectors or other fields of finance that are coming to the platform to give their wisdom.
Yeah.
One of the big ones being in property. Obviously, we don't talk about it that much on the show. So we'll be having some more content around that. So please keep an eye on for that.
And that could be an excellent goal for you when you're setting your 2021 goals. Adding some financial education. Maybe you want to read one financial education book during 2021 or complete one of our free courses. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. And I think education is just an important money goal as the actual saving itself.
You know what could be a really cool little goal for people is trying to ask us or get asked to answer one question on air. So if you're the type of person that's like a passive listener to this, ask a question. Because it might just give you the buy-in you need to get things rolling.
Yeah.
No question is silly. So ask us and we'll help you out with that. And it might be, reaching out to other people. It might be just talking to someone about your finances, asking someone, hey, do you want to do this together? Do you want to learn about this? Do you want to come to an event? Do you want to? That can be a very easy win for you, and those things snowball because that feedback loop from like that positive reinforcement gets shorter, and the shorter it is, the easier it is to build a habit around that. So
yeah, and once you start talking to people who are comfortable talking about money, you realize it's not actually that scary to talk about, and it can be fun.
Totally, yeah, it can be, and it's good if you want to have a family, if you want to do whatever you want to do, if you want to help your friends or your family members or your children, come and learn this stuff. The basics you can pick up pretty quick, and then you can move on with. Speaking of talking about like how we're going to help you a bit more in 2021. Send us your recommendations of books. Send us your ideas for episodes, for guests. You can reach us, podcast@ras.com.au, but you can just find us with any of the contact forms on our websites or on the Facebook group that we've got going on. So,
maybe even ask a question there.
Yeah, and that would be great. If you ask a question in the group, there are plenty of smart people, and including some guests that have been on the show that are actually in the Facebook group. So you never know who's going to answer, which is pretty cool. Have I missed anything, Kate?
I think we've kind of wrapped it up. I mean, I hope that you are able to spend a few hours reflecting on the year that's been and your financial highs and lows, the progress you've made, and also sort of get yourself sorted and set up for next year. Automate as much as you can, find someone to help you keep accountable. And I really hope you do have success during 2021 achieving your financial goals. And hit us up. Let us know how you go, and we'd love to hear. We're definitely sharing a lot more listener stories throughout 2021. And if you do something crazy like pay off 50 grand of debt, or invest for the first time, or have a kid and sort of set them up financially, let us know.
Let us know how you do it, because you're living and experiencing things that we haven't done yet, or we may be able to help you in some way. So, or at least someone in the community might too. So we want to hear it all. Cool.
Well, Happy New Year, folks.
Happy New Year, Kate. As always, thanks for joining me, not only on this episode, but thanks for the year.